road project is a one-time expenditure. School funding is an ongoing expenditure. So you really see that as a trade-off?
So let's start with how we're spending the money. It's not so much that we're spending so much money or spending money on education. I think we need to get the how we're spending it right before we can really fix the education problem. And it's not a problem. Let me restate that. I think education is doing a good job with what they have, but there is a system that we need to improve. I'm for education reform. And I think until we can get accountability into the education process, we're not going to get a lot of progress there. And by accountability, I mean, who's responsible for the kids' education at our schools? Who in the schools is responsible? Is it the teacher? Is it the principal? Is it the parent? Is it the superintendent? I would suggest that somebody needs to take responsibility, and I would suggest that the principal be responsible for the education in the school. But if the principal is responsible and accountable, then they need to be unfettered and allowed to run the schools in the way that they see best. The principal should be responsible to or accountable to the superintendent in the same way. But if you ask me to run a company or to run an organization, or any of you are asked to run an organization and weren't given the opportunity to pick who works for you, reward those who do a good job for you, and ask those that don't do a good job for you to leave. If you weren't able to do that, you would say, hey, look, education, our progress, our performance may not be it's not my responsibility anymore because I can't run it the way I'm supposed to. So my suggestion would be we need to get accountability into the school.
I just break in on this one because if the principals are running the show, where does the buck stop? I mean, we've seen it at Timpview High School. We've seen a lot of irregularities that are now being supported by the state auditor, and as practices that are going on elsewhere. Where does the buck stop?
The buck stops at the principal. I think the principal needs to be responsible for their school. I mean, I can tell, when I was in Disneyland with our friends, we got to the front of the line and they looked at each other and said, where's our kid? And the husband said, well, I thought you had her. And the other one said, well, I thought you had her. They ran back and there she is sitting in the stroller waiting for somebody to take her out. So, you know, it was funny then, and we're happy it didn't work out worse, but that's what's going on in our schools in a major way. We don't have anybody that can stand up and say, I can take responsibility because I'm accountable for it, and I can run it, and I can make the decisions there.
Kevin, accountability in education.
Well, I have 12 principles. I talk a lot about transparency, stewardship, accountability is one of them. That's absolutely key. What is the vision? What do we want here? We want to have the very best cutting-edge workforce that we can have as they finish so they can support their families and strengthen the community, increase economic vitality. I believe there's a lot of right in our education, but we need to move forward in many ways and catch up. If you use the technology in your business that is available to our general across the board school classroom, you'd be out of business. There's technology, and what we can do there is vital. That's part of that big key. Accountability is absolutely critical. I'd say we all need to be on board. You need to have the superintendent, the principal, the teachers. We all need, and the parents. We all need to be vested and engaged in the process. Certainly, there's an opportunity to make some changes and move forward, certainly, but it requires all engaged in the process.
With accountability in education then, are you both looking at like teacher incentive pay? Is that something that you'd look at as legislation to say we're going to start holding teachers accountable for how they're doing in their classroom, not based just on test scores, but based on maybe a set criteria of how they perform, you know, based on evaluations from their principals? Are those things that you're willing to support as accountability?
Yeah, well, I think, again, it comes back to the principal's choice. If the principal wants that, that's what they ought to do. But so the question then becomes, how do you, merit-based pay is a sort of emotional issue, and I think there's a lot of ways to determine and survey and find out how teachers are doing. Are teachers doing well? I sympathize with teachers. They're stuck in a system that we need to return nobility and honor to teaching because they work hard. I've spent about 900 hours at the local high school watching what teachers do and what they go through to accomplish what they do. And I think they're stuck in a system that, imagine, so when we bought Maxfield Candy Company, I went out and there was one guy who sat on a sack of sugar every day and told everybody what to do around him. And it wasn't a very good example. And we talked to him every week. And then finally, by the third or fourth week, I just said, you know what? It's time for you to move on. You need to find another job. And when he left that candy kitchen, everybody in the candy kitchen the next day applauded me when I walked in, and I couldn't figure out why. And they said, that guy has been sitting on that sack of sugar telling us what to do for the last 5 years. Somebody finally cares. Somebody cares enough to make an improvement here, and I can tell you the kitchen got cleaner, it got faster, it got more efficient. And I don't think we have that ability. If you go in and work every day and work your tail off and get the exact same pay increase that the person that doesn't work very hard gets all the time, that's the definition of socialism. And I don't think it works very well. I just don't think it does.
The best government is the government that's closest to the people. And when you're talking about how do we give incentive to the outcomes that we desire, and how do we avoid giving incentives to outcomes we don't desire, that's a good example. Currently, the pay of teachers is primarily based on tenure and level of education. Well, how about the interaction in the classroom and what you're doing to be a real teacher, to drill down and get the principles and the basics and all that goes into educating a cutting-edge workforce, bring that to pass. So when we talk about incentive, it's important that we incentive to what we're valuing. For example, UVU is the largest university in the state of Utah, and it's the most efficient university. By the way, it's the most underfunded university as well. So what we're doing in a sense is we're telling them, thanks for your great efficiency. Let's lower what we're giving you. So we need to think outside the box, and they're part of the solution. We need to listen, get the teachers, get the administrators, get the community, get parents involved in that process, and allow the incentives to flow to the outcomes that we desire.
Are we underfunding public education?
Well, we currently spend 62% of our budget on education. It's a $12,950,000,000 some odd. Well, let me give you an example. I was in a classroom in Provo High School, and I looked at the textbook, and the textbook that was first issued in 1988. And I talked to the teacher. What would be one thing you'd like to see? She said, I'd like to see more funding for textbooks. But really, that is a local issue, how they're going to spend the money. If we need to have more money for education, I would not advocate a tax increase. What I would say is that we need to look at the opportunity to strengthen our economic vitality, look at business education partnerships that can bring a perspective and resources into the school. In fact, you talk about funding, that's a tax issue. I'd like to see a tax incentive given to if they have a pallet of paper and they put it in the classroom, they save that school $1,000 because why should they not receive some sort of a tax voucher for what they put there? That type of focus, again, brings that type of we give incentive to the outcomes that we're seeking. Are we underfunding education? That's the question.
Well, or unreasonably. Is there anything we can do about it? We have large family sizes in Utah, and we're spending actually quite a large percentage on education. So if we're going to add money to the system, where's it going to come from?
There's three places that I would advocate. Increasing economic vitality, getting the resources from our public lands, and that's a whole nother discussion we can delve into if we'd like. And then business education partnerships. My experience over the last 20 years working and helping in the classroom would indicate that has been a successful model, business education partnerships. And when our economy is strong, there's help there. I think if we need to maintain 62% of our budget going to education, certainly.
We're dead last in funding in the United States in terms of states. So in terms of how much we spend per pupil, we're dead last. But I don't think that's the only issue. I don't think that is the issue. I think the issue is how we spend the money. Randy, I think you even had an idea, and I haven't talked to you about this, but I've heard of your idea of printing textbooks using newspapers. So lower the cost. I mean, we could sell those books for $1 a piece or something if I understood it right. That's how we spend the money. How are we spending that money? So Finland, if there was a direct correlation between how much we spend and education outcomes, I'd be beating the drum about more money. But right now, it's not about more money, it's about how we're spending it. Finland spends half what we do per pupil and get twice the outcome. We went from 17th in math in the 34 industrialized countries to 31st in the last 10 years. So we cannot keep going that direction if we're going to compete in a global economy. And I can tell you, having a plant in China and one in Canada and joint ventures in Poland, I can tell you those kids are in it to win it, man. They go to school longer, they work harder, and that's who we're competing with. We're not competing with the other states as much, although in our district we are. So at the end of the day, it's how we're spending the money.
But don't they also send students into the trades if they don't measure up academically? That's something we don't really do in the United States.
They stratify. In Finland, they do stratify, and I think it's not, there's good ideas that come out of Finland. We ought to be paying attention. There's good ideas coming out of charter schools, and I don't know that we're paying enough attention to them. Like them or hate them.
Should the United States be doing that, stratifying, saying if the kid doesn't make the cut academically, move them off into another program?
They can move back and forth. In Finland, they can move from from a university level to a technical level. They can move back and forth if they show the aptitude. And if it works, I mean, look at some of the charter schools. They stratify. They have kids that are, third graders and sixth graders sitting in the same class in the same math class because that's the level that they're at. I guess I'm not very patient with. I think we need education reform, and I'm not very patient with all the reasons of why we're not reforming education. I think we need serious reform.
Let me understand what you did you say that Finland spends half of what we do per pupil?
Per student. That's correct, of Utah. And remember, so Utah is 50th.
Finland would be 110th then, is that what you're saying?
That'd be way less than us.
When we look at education, what we need to do is recognize that there are great solutions everywhere. The same pattern for one student is not going to be as effective across the board. So we look at charter schools, we look at public education in the traditional sense, we look at homeschooling. We need to take best practices and allow them to filter across the board.
But we just need more money, though, I guess. Sorry, Billy. But we need more money in the system. I mean, Andrew Holmes, running for the Senate, the state Senate, wanted to double the amount of money that Utah allocates to public education. That would not leave any money left over for state government.
Before we double our money, before we look at more money, I think we need to better utilize what we have. We have wonderful infrastructure, classrooms that sit empty most of the time. What can we do to better utilize infrastructure so that we can spend reallocation? It may not be necessary. I would advocate not right now that we need more money, but better allocation of what we have and better utilization of the resources that are there.
Yeah, to that end, we could pay the teachers a lot more. We could pay them a third more if we went to year-round school. Right. And I think that's not a bad idea. I think it's painful for a lot of us. But if we're really serious about education reform, we ought to be doing it because I think teachers should get paid more. At some point, they've got to get paid more.